Welcome to the Produce Moms Podcast, where we believe there is a produce mom in all of us. I'm Lori Taylor, founder and CEO of the Produce Moms. For 10 years, I sold fresh produce to over 300 grocery stores in the U.S. And today, my team and I are fully focused on inspiring people to eat more fruits and vegetables. This show is just one of the ways that we hope to inspire you and your family to eat more produce and live a better life. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, join our community of almost 40,000 in all 50 states and over 30 countries by visiting theproducemoms.com/subscribe. And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for being here. Enjoy today's show. Welcome back, everyone. Today on the Produce Moms Podcast, we are bringing forward two gentlemen that work in what might have been the most disrupted stage of the food supply chain over the last several months as our country responds and recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, fun fact, we are bringing on one of the guys who I worked with when I was at Indianapolis Fruit Company. So it's going to be a great show. We're all going to learn a lot. And it's my pleasure to welcome, we have Greg Corsaro. He's the president and COO of Fresh Edge. Fresh Edge is a family of fresh food distributors. It includes Indianapolis Fruit Company, which all Produce Moms fans are familiar with. It's where I learned and fell in love with the produce industry. I was a proud employee there for a decade. Piazza Produce, as well as Get Fresh. So that's their family of companies. They are food distributors. And then we also have Michael Grinstead. He is the general manager of Get Fresh and heavily involved with the whole Fresh Edge family of companies with strategy and business development. And Michael is one of my dear friends that I've, had the pleasure of getting to know better over the last couple of years. So I told these guys before the show, I go, how do I introduce you other than just saying, these are my friends, but but it is going to be a great show. And Greg and Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. Really excited.
Thanks for having us, Lori, and ditto on being friends here to the most part.
Yes, thank you. So since there's three of us, we've got to make sure and identify your two voices. So Greg, please say hello so everyone knows your voice. And then Michael, after Greg introduces himself, please say hello.
Well, this is Greg. Hello, everyone. And I'll take this opportunity to mention that Lori and I go way back before Indianapolis Fruit. I knew Lori when she was a little bitty girl. So, and I couldn't be prouder of where she is today. So,
thank you.
And hey, everyone, this is Michael coming from rainy Chicago today. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Lori better over the last couple of years and, really believe in her brand and everything that she's building with the Produce Moms, and great mom, more importantly than anything, to Mac and Joe, and a great wife to Chip as well. So excited to be here today.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. We do. Michael's always so great to ask me about my family every time I see him. That's so important for anyone listening today. Always ask people about their families. It means so much. All right. So here we are on the Produce Moms Podcast. And, guys, like I said at the beginning with the intros, I really think that, wholesale distribution, you guys were just, it was awful for you. We have to talk about what happened when the food service industry came to a screeching halt in March. And I think, Greg, it would be great if you could get us started.
Sure. Everybody knows how devastating this thing has been for the economy and the food service and hospitality industries in particular. And my heart goes out to everyone at the restaurant level and the growers and everybody associated that has had to struggle so mightily with this. What I thought I'd mention with respect to when the world came crashing down in mid-March is I think everybody realizes that with the closure of hotels and restaurants and schools and food service outlets that there's an effect on everyone in the industry and those employees. What I don't think that everybody realizes is that there was no notice when things started to shut down. So as far as distributors in the perishable food industry, there were billions of dollars sitting in warehouses or actually in trucks across the country headed to these distributors' warehouses that basically had to be thrown away. And because there was no outlet for them. And so we tried to move them to the various food banks and agencies that could use them. But that was probably as devastating as the loss of revenue going forward.
Yeah. I mean, you had a warehouse full of produce. And, well, not just a warehouse, warehouses full of produce, not to mention all the product that was inbound, and also not to mention all the product that you had already delivered to your clientele whose doors were shuttered and they didn't have an opportunity to, serve it. And therefore it made it more difficult for them to be able to pay their bills.
Exactly. And the farmers had stuff in the ground that has come up and not had outlets for it. It's just been a huge ripple effect throughout the whole food supply chain.
It has. And, to Greg's point, I mean, some of the crops, and especially crop agriculture, you're talking a 50-day harvest cycle. I mean, there's how do you plan for that? And I can tell you that everyone in the food industry, and Greg, maybe you're comfortable sharing some thoughts on this. I mean, but an overwhelming sentiment as I've studied and listened to all of our industry stakeholders talk about how the pandemic has affected agriculture is, at the end of the day, food security is national security. And I think that all of us have taken on a level of responsibility knowing that we've got to keep operation going. We have to keep food moving in this country.
Yes, and you mentioned about food security, Lori. It's been kind of reaffirming that throughout this whole pandemic and the emphasis placed on proper hygiene and proper sanitation measures. If you look at everything that all of us have been doing all along, we really haven't had to alter our practices as far as the food handling aspect goes. And for many of people in the industry, as far as the hygiene and the hand washing and the cleaning of offices and warehouse spaces, many in our industry were already close to the point of the advisories post-pandemic or during pandemic. So that's a statement to the fact of the security in the food supply chain that has been there from the beginning. But another thing I want to kick back to when you mentioned the growing cycles of the farmers, this is a continuing issue as the economy starts to reopen now. Most of our growers have absolutely no idea what to plant because we don't know when everything's going to open or how the response will be to the public. So it's like the jelly of the month club. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Goodness. Yeah. I don't want this gift. I guess it is like the Jelly of the Month Club. Oh, what a comparative, Greg.
Had to quote Christmas Vacation.
I know, right? I mean, I think that when we create the little graphic that promotes this episode of all the wonderful things you said, I'm going to be tempted to pull that one as your marquee quote from this whole conversation. But thank you for the laugh. So Michael, let's talk about the pivoting. I feel like pivoting is, how has your business pivoted? That is as common of a question as this is an unprecedented, or as common of a statement as this is an unprecedented situation. I mean, it is so true. You really, with your role in strategy and development, I know that you had to be involved in this. I also think it's probably important as we get into this topic, help all of our listeners understand who you service because, Greg kind of mentioned it. I know it because of my time at the sales desk, but through the Fresh Edge family of food distributors, who are you sending food to? Let's answer that first, and then we'll get to the pivot.
Pivoting is definitely the name of the game in this whole process. As Lori, and your listeners have gathered over the years, I'm sure that's the nature of the whole industry is pivoting and just rolling with the punches. But this was the biggest punch borderline in modern history. So, but as far as the Fresh Edge companies go, so I'm sure as you explained over the years, Indianapolis Fruit primarily goes to wholesale distribution to retailers, and then Piazza.
So that's your grocery stores, everyone. Indie Fruit sells to grocery stores. That's all right. That's why at the top of the show, I'm able to say I sold fresh produce to over 300 grocery stores in the United States. It's because of my time at the sales desk at Indie Fruit. Okay. So thank you.
And primarily, mom and independent grocery stores versus the, the big chains that are out there. And then Piazza, Indianapolis, and Get Fresh here up in Chicago, primarily distribute to restaurants in the food service sector, but also a number of hotels, event centers, retirement homes, et cetera, as well. But those are prime customer base in our family of companies.
Sure. And when you're saying things like hotels and schools and stadiums and restaurants, those are all businesses that shut their doors. And so you didn't have a choice but to pivot. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the changes that you've made and the ways that, you're serving your grower partners as well as your employees and your customers as best you can, despite all this disruption.
Yeah, and like you said, pivoting was so key and important in all of this. The main thing that we wanted to do right after the crisis, and you got into this with Greg, was mainly finding a home for the product. And we're able to donate a lot amount to our employees at the time, and they were so grateful. But as far as, finding alternative revenue sources with the restaurants just shutting off like they did in our different markets, I know you participated in it as well, Lori, but at Piazza, they did drive-up boxes where, people could come up and, pick out their assortment of produce and take it home. And I know that was really, really successful there right after this crisis hit, because grocery stores were overwhelmed, and we were on the Indianapolis Fruit side having a hard time of filling orders in the crazy expanded and increased demand over there. And so we were able to funnel a lot out of Piazza, our restaurant service company there. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, it was great.
Product.
Yeah, I sent Chip. I stayed home and I was like, you put on the mask and you drive to Piazza and deal with it. But no, it was a great opportunity for our family to bring home some extremely fresh produce that was, very, very reasonably priced. I found all of the expenses to be less than what I would spend at the grocery store. Mac and I made the IGTV video. If anyone wants to look into the Instagram archives of the Produce Moms, you'll see at the middle of March, Mac and I did a green juice thing. All that beautiful produce on the kitchen island was all from the Piazza pickup that I did. And we also got I think a whole pallet of Hint Waters because I'm obsessed with those, and and you have those for sale too. But it was, it's a great service. I have seen a lot of my friends taking advantage of what you're doing with the pop-up markets on the different sides of town, where you guys are putting together these market boxes of, you can get a fruit box, a vegetable box, a protein box, and then it's all pre-order, I think, and then the customer comes and picks it up. I haven't done that yet, but I will say that the pickup at Piazza Produce, my husband said it was a flawless operation. We saved money. We got extremely fresh produce. I felt good because I was, in a way helping out my former employer and all the people I love in agriculture. And I knew I was getting the safest, healthiest food that I could for the family. So it was a total win. But well,
thanks for that marketing plug.
Hey, anytime. No, it's authentic. But is that something that, you're a wholesale distributor. Your companies have historically always been B2B. Do you think when the market stabilized, is this a new thing, or too early to say? Or, selling to consumers has never been part of your model.
Yeah, and one thing that we did with it, speaking with your pop-up markets, that those have really taken off, and those have been going really well. Where if people do place pre-orders, and then our driver goes to a parking lot, and then people come to that truck to pick up what they ordered, and that has gone really well, and really too hard and too soon to tell of if that will continue. A lot of our peers in the industry in our food service space, they have had just amazing innovation out of absolute desire just to survive. And I think a lot of things that people never would have done in a million years in our traditional business, that they've had to survive during these times. I think a lot will stay, or at least keep a small piece of it going. Where if God forbid there's another wave of this, down the road, you don't want to just totally abandon the things that helped get you through these difficult times. So, it's not. None of this was what we traditionally do or what we ever would have thought of doing, but a lot of these things that have done well, could possibly be part of our continued operations moving forward, but a little too hard to tell right now.
Sure. Well, I will say, I think it's been a great service to the community, and I think it's been a great service to the growers that you work with, and all of the food suppliers that you work with, and obviously also your employees. You had to do what you could to keep things moving. So. Greg, let's talk a little bit about your role with restaurants. My goodness, I don't think that there's a restaurant in Indianapolis that could say they'd be in business without, Piazza produce. It's just, your trucks are everywhere here in our hometown. And I'm sure it's a similar scenario, Michael, for you and living in Chicago with the Get Fresh trucks. But tell us more, Greg, how Fresh Edge is supporting restaurants.
A lot of different ways. Probably first and foremost is realizing the situation that the restaurants are in from a financial perspective. And this goes all the way back to our grower shippers and their support too. So there's had to be an understanding of cash flow. And incoming cash, and being able to all the way up the supply chain through our vendor partners, being able to realize where people are and understand, not sacrifice security, but understand where we need to be. That's one way where I feel we've supported our restaurants. Another way, again, you can take this all the way back to the vendor community. There's a different type of product now due to the way the world is and the way the world's going to be that the restaurants need. And so some of the vendors are creating these different, like, variety boxes of produce, certain things that sanitary items that aren't necessarily food items and so forth, different things that the customers are going to need. And so we've developed them all the way, and we're providing that to the customers. And then just consultation as far as menu planning. There are going to be reduced menu options and alternate menu options and so forth. So just anything we can help our customers succeed. We've had to pivot and not just be a support person or a commodity supplier.
Right. Yeah. With you just saying that, supporting them with, the menu rationalization that's going to inevitably have to happen more than likely at most restaurants. And supporting them with their innovation at the restaurant level. It actually reminded me of a guest that we just interviewed through our COVID-19 Stories from the Frontline series. It wasn't here on the podcast, although he was a former podcast guest, and that was Frank Muir, the president and CEO of the Idaho Potato Commission. And when I was talking to him in May, and he was explaining to me that one thing that the Idaho Potato Commission has done is they've invested in recipe development that is optimized for carryout. And I thought that was really interesting. And, and so as Greg is saying these things about how, the restaurant vendors, people like the Fresh Edges of the world, those companies are banding together with the whole supply chain, the growers, the food suppliers, to make sure that the restaurants are as empowered as they can. Because I think we all know, like, this is not just good for business, but it's, oh my gosh, I think we've all realized how good it is for life. I mean, I really miss going to the restaurants, and that's how I celebrated everything in my life. I had a quarantine birthday, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't go to my favorite restaurant. It just didn't even feel right, you know?
Completely agree with you, Lori. One thing I was thinking about is just what the future of the food service industry is going to look like on the other side of this. And I think people like you are going to for sure want to get right back out there. And I'm in the same boat as long as places are doing things, CDC recommended, the right way. But the whole restaurant model, I think, is going to change on the other side of this. And the Vietnamese place that we went to in Dallas, Lori, where the community seating with people that aren't in your party and, just right on top of each other.
When I thought that the other family that was at the table was with us. And I was like, I was like, Michael, thanks for introducing me to them. And they're like, we're not with you.
It was like a table of 10 people. We had 6, and there was a family of 4 off on the side. And I had no idea who they were. But, I think that's just going to be completely different, regardless of distancing, while those measures are in place. I think that part is just going to be, completely changed moving forward. But, one thing that I think will continue to stay, and you got into it a little bit on how we've been consulting with restaurants, is of them still having meal kits and to-go options that are, set menu items on the other side of this. I've done so many of these meal kits, and one that I actually did last night that I thought was really cool is a place close to me in downtown Chicago. Was they had a meal kit, but also a painting kit where you pick up your food, you go home, and it gave you a canvas, painting utensils, a paintbrush, and then a Zoom link where you went on and someone had, an instructor walked us through with, a painting class through it. And then we had our food through the restaurant as well. And you could add on any beverages from that as well. So I think there'll be a lot of meal kits and innovative things like that will make it out on the other side of this.
Yeah. And that's the silver lining of this whole thing is we are eating more meals around our own kitchen table as a family, and doing activities like having a night in with a good meal and, enjoying some artwork or another family activity. And, as you were explaining that, you guys are both going to be very proud to hear that on Mother's Day, obviously we were still in quarantine, and the boys and Chip were like, well, what do you want for dinner? And I really wanted to have a cookout, but we didn't have, none of us really had the energy to go fight the crowds at the grocery store. So we used the market pickup at Bubba's 33, which is one of the restaurants within the Texas Roadhouse restaurant group. And we picked up like a burger kit. So we got like the meat patties and the cheese and the buns. And then I said, add on the veggie and the fruit box, of course, like the produce moms wants fruits and vegetables for Mother's Day. And then we also got a pizza kit, and the kids assembled their own pizza. It was really fun. And the fruit and vegetable boxes were delivered in Piazza produce boxes. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I forgot that just happened in our home.
Well, Lori, I'm glad you mentioned the Texas Roadhouse group, because they are a great customer of ours. Everybody throws around partnership, and they are a true partner. It is a truly mutually beneficial relationship. So that I'm glad you went there and patronized them. I will tell you this though. If there are other places in where your actual meat is coming from Piazza produce too. So keep your eyes open for that as well.
I will. Thank you. So let's talk now, Michael and Greg both. Let's talk about, just this month, your company Fresh Edge, in partnership with United Fresh Produce Association, honored 9 of the country's most innovative chefs and food service professionals as part of the United Fresh Produce Excellence and Food Service Award Program. Wow, what a year for everyone in food service. Tell us more about what it means for Fresh Edge to be recognizing champions within food service always, but especially in 2020?
Well, the first thing I will say is, for most of the people, if not all, that are listening to this podcast, realize how hard the job is, any job in the food service industry is. And when you talk about chefs and other food service professionals, 20-hour days, high stress environment, a very dynamic environment. Things are changing all the time. Nothing ever works the way it's supposed to. And a demanding customer base. Everyone deserves an award for whatever they do in this industry. Mm-hmm. So when the opportunity came to sponsor this award, Michael's dad, Steve, and Steve Grinstead's our CEO, by the way, and more than a by the way example there. He's a great leader for our company. He and I jumped at the chance to sponsor this award, and we really didn't think of the publicity for us. We thought of, hey, we really want to sponsor this award to say thank you to everybody. And so we're real excited to be the title sponsor on the award.
Mm-hmm. Good. Michael, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, these chefs, have been through a year and a half, 20 years during this whole process. And, we want to mention all of the chefs that were nominated, and, it was very, very tough decisions to be made by the selection committee. But I want to specifically point out that there was a new category added to this year's winners, and that was the supermarkets and retail operator. And we mainly focused on chefs in more of the traditional sense, but the grocery store prepared food sections at certain places have definitely matched or surpassed a lot of restaurant quality food. And, one thing that we were excited, and especially with our overall family of companies and connections, we want to showcase more than just traditional restaurants that are out there. So that was a really exciting category that we added. And that was one that we were passionate about. But, just an awesome award, awesome accomplishment for these winners. And, I feel bad that, they're going to be cheated from, being recognized in person there at the convention that was going to be in San Diego. But, we definitely plan on, as restrictions start to lift here, on traveling out and visiting with these winners as much as possible, and still giving them a voice and recognition for all of their hard work over their years, and especially during these most recent times.
That's right. And you know what? Everyone can visit unitedfreshlive.org, and you can actually experience the virtual expo. It's free to attend. And you can interact with all of these honorees and food service that Fresh Edge, in partnership with United Fresh, is, they're recognizing and presenting these awards to. So, and I believe that unitedfreshlive.org, they're actually going to keep it up throughout the summer. So you'll have a chance, if you can't get to it today, don't worry. The website will still be live, tomorrow. So go check it out. And you'll also be able to learn more about Fresh Edge too. And, with that, it is time to close out the show. I could talk to both of you for hours. My closing remarks here are, I guess, twofold. So I'm going to start with Greg, and I want people to know, Greg was, he was the CFO of Indianapolis Fruit Company when I worked there. And he was extremely, he was instrumental in my ability to grow and do what I am doing today. Greg he's such a good leader, and he empowered me, and he didn't have to, the owners of the company, they all had children my own age, and they could have easily been like, Lori, great idea. We're going to have our daughter do it, and they didn't. They respected and empowered me each and every step of the way. And Greg taught me a lot when we went through that acquisition process, and I became the owner of the Produce Moms. That was another thing that the company didn't have to do. And you can listen back to episode 1 for that whole story. But it's been such a journey. Greg continues to be a cheerleader for the work that I have. Every time we see each other at industry events, he's always one of my biggest champions, and always happy to see me, and always reminds me that I've got a work family at Indianapolis Fruit Company, and it means a lot. He's just been there for me my whole life. And Michael has been someone that I really have, Michael and I got to know each other really just over the last few years. And it's been wonderful because he and his father and his brother really embraced me, and they are such well-respected leaders within the industry. And they brought me out to Dallas, and I spoke at the Dallas Fresh Food Association luncheon, and we did some work to help raise awareness for bringing salad bars to schools in Dallas. And these are just, both of these gentlemen on the show today have had a tremendous role in my professional journey, but they're also really good people. And I love when that happens. Like when they're smart, when someone is smart and kind, it's just like the best thing ever. So guys, it's been a real pleasure having you on and sharing this time with you today, and helping you raise awareness for what you've been through at Fresh Edge, and how, you're still in that mindset of how can we empower and help. And I love that. So that being said, you guys get the final word. That's our tradition here at the show. So Michael, why don't you start, and then Greg, the final goodbyes and send offs. But thank you both.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Lori. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm a loyal listener in the podcast, and can't wait to cringe on listening back on this, I'm sure, on some of the stuff I've said. But really appreciate it, and telling our story, which is one that I feel like has been hard to really get a read on and be conveyed in the national news. But we'll get through it, and just want to encourage as much consumption of fresh produce and vegetables to all your listeners and everyone across the world. And we're doing our part to get that in front of folks. So thanks so much for having us, Lori.
Lori, thank you very much for having us. Now I'm gonna talk to you after this about saying such good things that make me get a little choked up when I think back about all of our things together. But let me just say this. There's a lot of people take stock in the fact that, they're told they empower people. Well, it's not hard to empower someone who comes to you with a great idea and does all the right things. It's easy to say yes. So there's no credit in the empowerment there. But I just want to recognize that you have been a solid voice for the industry and the people affected by the industry all the way to the end consumer. I hear that I don't know how many times, and I'm proud when I tell people, hey, Lori's been a friend of mine since she was young and I was younger, and continue. So you make us all proud, and we really appreciate what you're doing. And anytime you need us to do anything, you let us know.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Produce Moms Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a featured guest, just send an email to lori@theproducemoms.com. We know there is a produce mom in you because there's a produce mom in all of us. Join our community on Facebook and all social platforms. Help us change the way America eats. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.